Hello everyone, and welcome to another Coding Fundamentals in GML tutorial. This will be the first of two tutorials on for loops. In this tutorial, we're going to cover the basics of for loops. And then later we'll revisit for loops and talk about some of the more advanced things you can do with them. For loops can be thought of as a shorthand for a while loop, which increment and test a loop variable. They're great for iterating, and they work well with arrays and data structures. A basic chart of a for loop would look like this. The first thing that happens is there's a line of code that initializes the for loop. After that, there's a check, much like in a while loop, to see if a condition is true. And if that condition is true, it will run the code, then it will update itself, and it will do the check again. Run the code, update itself, do the check again, run the code, update, check. If this check is ever false, it will exit. The form of the for loop may look intimidating at first, but hopefully with the help of this chart, it will make sense. So here we have the first assignment. That's this initialization line here. Then we have the expression. This is the part of the for loop that is checked, the condition that is checked to see if the for loop continues. That's this check here. If it is true, this statement, or all the code in the block, will execute. And after this code executes, this statement will run. So that's the code in the block, and then the update. Then it'll check the expression, run the code, update, check the expression, run the code, and update. Again, check the expression, run the code, and update, check the expression, run the code, and update. And if this expression is ever false, then the code will stop, the loop will stop, and you will exit out and continue on. So here is a very basic example of a for loop. All it will do is iterate 10 times, and it will print the loop number and hello world. So first we have the initialization line, or the first assignment, var I equals 0. This creates the iterator, which is generally I, but could be named anything else, and assigns the value 0 to it. Then the condition is checked. Is I less than 10? Well, 0 is less than 10, so this is true, and we will run this code. So loop will equal 0, hello world, and then we will increment I will equal 1. Is 1 less than 10? Yes. Loop is 1, hello world, I now equals 2. 2 is less than 10, loop 2, hello world, 3. 3 is less than 10, loop 3, hello world, 4, and so on. Eventually, this will equal 10. 10 is not less than 10, and so we will exit and continue. Now, this example doesn't do very much, but it might give you an idea of how useful loops can be. Let's say you have an inventory, and you're storing that inventory in an array. With a for loop, you can loop through the inventory, looking at each space. For example, maybe you're trying to see if the inventory holds some type of item. And if so, return what position that is. So in this example, we're setting I to 0, and then we're seeing if that is less than the inventory size. And if so, we're checking it against a position in an array and seeing if it matches an argument. If these two things are the same, that means we've found that item in the inventory, and we can return. Again, return is another keyword used in scripts. That position. So this could be part of a function that looks through an inventory and sees if an item is inside of an inventory, and if that item is in the inventory, tells you what position that item is at. So you can then go get that item and use it, etc. Okay, let's switch over to GameMaker and see a couple of examples. As always, I've set a breakpoint and run the debugger. This example will do what we just talked about. It'll print the loop number and hello world into the output. Loop 0, hello world, and I'm just going to go through these. Notice how each time it's incrementing. So I is equal to 4. Go up here, we increment I. Now it's equal to 5, printing it out. And once, let's see, let's stop right here. So I is now going to be equal to 10 after this. 10 is not less than 10, so we're exiting out of that loop and continuing on. Next, we're going to loop through an array and print out each value in the array. We talked about how to create arrays in the data type tutorial. Here we're simply creating an array where the values of the array are going to be 5, 2, 1, 5, 2, and 10. So we create that array and switch over here. We can see that we have made an array 5, 2, 1, 5, 2, and 10. And here's the position in the array. We'll talk about this more in the array tutorial, but arrays are 0 indexed. That means that 0 is the first position in an array. So an array with 6 things in it will start at 0 and go through 5. In this for loop then, we are going to start at 0 and we're going to go for as long as the iterator is less than the length of the array. And this, as you might guess, is simply a built-in GameMaker function that gets how long an array is. So we're going to iterate through this. Let me switch over to the output window. We're going to iterate through this and we're going to print out the value of each position in the array. And notice this is working because we're telling it to look at that point in the array. So 3, what is the third position in the array? The third position is 5. So when we print that out, wait a second, is it still 3? Oops, sorry. So 4, the fourth position in the array is 2. And when we print that out, we get 2. The fifth position is 10. And now I is going to be longer than the length of the array, so we're going to exit out of the loop. One last example. In this example, we're going to loop through the array, the same array as before, and we're going to get a sum or a total of all the values in the array added together. We're going to do that by creating a variable called sum, setting it to 0, and then we're going to go through, and at each point in the loop, we're going to add that value in the array to this variable. So switching to this tab, we can keep track of the variable sum. So sum equals 0. It's equal to 5. That's the value, the first value in the array. Equal to 7, 5 plus 2. Equal to 8. Equal to 13. Equal to 15. And last, it'll be equal to 25. Then we will exit out and we will print the value. Sum is 25 down here. And that's the last test. Now there's one very important thing I want to note before we end. You'll notice that I am saying var I. And if you remember from the variable scope tutorial, that means I is a local variable. This is very important because if I did not make I a local variable, when the for loop was over, I would have been created as an instance variable for this instance. At a minimum, this is going to create unnecessary variables that your program is going to be keeping track of. And in a worst case scenario, it can cause problems because you might reference I thinking that I will be one thing when in fact I will be something else because it's already been saved as that variable earlier in the program. However, when you use the local variable, at the end of this event, I will be destroyed, which means it won't be kept in memory, it won't exist, and it can't mess up other things in your program. In summary then, for loops are great for iterating. You can use them to iterate over arrays and lists and even things like maps. They're also much harder to create an infinite loop with if you follow this basic format, because you're always going to be iterating a set amount of times. And they're important enough that I will be returning to the subject of arrays to do another more advanced tutorial to talk about things like looping backwards and nesting for loops, and some other tips and tricks that make arrays even more useful. As always, the links in this slide, as well as links to the slides and the source code themselves, will be below. And that's it. Thanks for watching.